No role plays, no conference calls, no BS. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader. This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, on this episode, we're going to be going over part 4 in this 4-part series on the 4 zones of thought leadership. 3 weeks ago, we discussed big picture elements like vision, strategy, and culture. 2 weeks ago, we talked about putting that plan into place and coming up with kind of contingency plans that didn't go against whatever your larger vision, strategy, and culture is. Last week, we had a fantastic discussion on the concept of what you're doing for other people, their development, the inclusivity of your team, the well-being of the people on your team. And these are all in the spirit of, like, what are you thinking about in advance? So this is thought leadership, not action leadership. So how are you putting a plan into place to do this? For the 4th part of this series, we're going to be talking about what are we doing for ourselves. So this concept of what are you doing for yourself, I think, is one that a lot of leaders, in an effort to be altruistic and empathetic, they oftentimes forget the importance of it in spirit of what are they doing for other people and the big picture and the tactical. They get forgotten in their own heads. What do you think about this?
Yeah, well, I think 2 things, actually. I think that sometimes a lot of leaders say that this is about, I just don't have the time for myself because of my people and everything like that. Some people say that. For some people that is true. For most people, it's either I don't want to say it's a fear of learning, but it's this idea that that if I just continue the work that I'm doing and I'm finding some level of success, that over time I'll get better and more efficient at it. Because let me be clear with you, real learning is hard. Like I'm just like to listen to something, to listen to an audiobook, to read a book, to watch a TED Talk, to take a class, to take a course, like to take a certification. Like a lot of times these things take time. They take commitment. They take sometimes, having to take tests or quizzes to validate what you've learned. But the hardest part about it is actually taking the time to think about how you would apply that idea or theory to the job that you have.
In the moment.
In the moment.
Yes.
Like right now, today, tomorrow, how does this change the way in which I'm doing my work? And so I say that because that is the hardest thing. And I know that it's frustrating, and I've been there where you say, okay, cool, I'm going to commit to this, Chris. I'm going to do this. I'm going to take time for myself. I'm going to read a leadership book. I'm going to watch this. I'm going to do that. I'm like, man, that was amazing. Man, that sounded great. I love that idea. That made so much sense. It validates what I think. And then you go, okay, how am I going to do that at work? And then you're like, oh my God, that's a lot of work. It's a lot of heavy lifting. I have to, I can't just do it. I have to influence other people to do it. Like, I'm going to need them to read this book to understand. Like, you just start to think about how hard it actually is to implement some of these things. And because you also want it to happen immediately. And so that could be a turnoff. That could be something that pushes people away from taking the time for self-learning and self-development. What I believe is you have to do it anyway. Because if you don't think about it as, this is going to change my life tomorrow, I'll be able to implement this in a week, and then now we'll have psychological safety, yay. Like we've talked about this before. You have to have a longer road on the impact that you want to have. But the way that I've learned this works for me is I take it all in. You and I have this podcast, so we talk about these things all the time, which is helpful to sharpen my perspective on them, and also to like build in, like, how would I think about that? How would I do that at work? How would I implement that idea? I journal, I take notes. Like, there's so many things that we do, but what I've learned over time is that thing might not be applicable right now, even if I want it to be. But 3 or 4 months from now, I'm going to run into a situation and somebody's going to ask me about this, or I'm going to have a thought. I'm going to hear something that somebody says and say, oh, I know exactly what needs to happen in the moment. And I'm gonna pull that skill. I'm gonna pull that idea. I'm gonna pull that quote that I had. I'm gonna say, hey, there's a theory, or there's this thing that I read a couple of months back that talked to this exact thing, and let's talk about that right now. And I've had that moment happen so much in my leadership career, especially over the last 5-8 years where I've really put a ton of effort into bettering myself as a leader. That's where I think we have to get over that hump. But I hear you. I hear you when you're just like, yeah, I would love that time and I would do that. But you're going to run into that hurdle. I guarantee it, and it's going to slow you down.
So you're not saying it's not a fear of learning. It's more maybe a fear of failure. It's a fear of failing to do this correctly.
It's the idea that it is a ginormous task.
It's daunting.
The realization that you go, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. I want to do this so bad. How in the hell do I bring this to life? And it's so much work that it's just easier to say, you know what? I'll spend more time focused on my people. Like that's
right.
What I see more often than not.
Or you try to use it right away because you want to validate that it was worth your time and effort to put the time in. And so it's like I bought a tool whenever I buy a tool at Home Depot. It's to do a job, right? So there's something around the house I have to get done. I don't have the tool for it. I'll go and buy it. And I remember once many years ago, the tool was not cheap. It was expensive, and so I bought the tool for the job. But in order to validate that the money spent on that tool was right, I found like 3 other jobs around the house that really it wasn't the right tool for, but I used it anyway. So I could say, look, I've used it 4 times. That's a recipe for disaster. Also, you'll end up using the wrong tool for that. So just having that sense of of personal accountability to yourself, of self-growth and being able to become an adaptable leader, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can put it into action right away. Your idea of, hey, this is something to file away because one day it will present itself. One day something will happen where you will need to be able to reach in and pull this out again. And if you know it well and it does resonate with you, it will be obvious in the moment. It'll be obvious in that moment that, oh, this is the right time to do this. And so it's important to put that effort in kind of, preemptively. It's like it's the earthquake kit, right? You put the first aid kit in the earthquake kit. Don't find reasons to go use it now. It's there for a reason, and it's for hopefully you don't need it, but if you do, it's there.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is thought leadership. You said it earlier, like how do we think about the things that we're going to do? And I think that's where we have to spend more time is as leaders, is saying like, how am I intentionally going to plan out my calendar or my time? How and where am I going to find the spaces to get this information? And then once I have this information, like who am I talking to about it? I think that's the other part of the unlock for a lot of this is like, it's more than just reading the book yourself. It's more than just having the info in your head. I know a lot of leaders that are on the I'm going to read 50 books in a year club, and I'm like I love it. Like read as much as you can, take that time, and especially if you enjoy it. But who are you talking to about it? You know what I mean? Like what notes are you taking? How are you considering this? With what you're going to do with the things that you've learned, and you have to have this intention. And because I think that you'll stumble across from time to time a conversation with somebody. Somebody will ask you something, but I think about when we started this podcast and how we would really talk about it on LinkedIn and social media. We share a lot of stuff. We share a lot of posts and things like that. What I realized was that by us doing this and sharing and talking about these things, more people wanted to talk to me about it. I know it's the same for you, as people reach out and they're like, hey, I want to talk to you about this. I saw this. You said this. You read about this. What are your thoughts on this? I'm really into this too. And I think that it was nice because it kind of created these spaces where people want to talk to me about leadership theory, and I have a lot of opinions. And then there's a lot of times when I'm like, well, but what do you think about that? Or what did you take away from that book? Or what did you think about that video? And then they share, and I'm like, damn, I never even thought about it like that. Like I was thinking about it like this. It made a lot of sense to me. You're thinking about it in a different way. That makes even more sense to me, especially based upon maybe the work that we're doing. So I think that it's just taking the time to, as you said, like get the information, having it accessible to you when you need it. But I will say over and over again, though, you have to plan that time or it will definitely get away from you, especially as your life becomes more complex. You have more responsibilities. You're a leader at work. You may be a leader at home. Like there's a lot of reasons why you won't get to that point. But you have to plan it if that's what you're looking to do to truly solidify your thoughts around leadership, and then all the other things that we talked about in this series.
Right. And if you're not good at it already, you're not going to be good at it at first. And that doesn't mean you need to give up. I think about how, I have a friend who's really into meditation, and they weren't really into meditation 5 years ago. And they were told that they were told they should get into it, and they tried and failed for over a year. And every time they would try to do it, they would get frustrated that it wasn't happening for them, but they stuck with it. And it took more than a year of attempting to meditate before they actually felt like they did it for the first time, because their mind would wander, they would focus on other things, and then afterwards they would think, I don't have the time for this, and it's not effective anyway. Why would I invest time into something that isn't effective that I can't do? And they just had to stick with it for a long enough time. It is very easy to, if you are in a rhythm that does not include this, that does not include thought leadership on your own personal growth and development and how agile you are as a leader, if you're not putting time into this, it's not part of your regular routine, it's easy to say, I don't have the time to do this, because we make time for what's important. And it hurts you even more if you feel like, hey, I've gotten where I am in my career without this. What really is the need? I will tell you that the number of personal evolutions that I have seen in myself and in other leaders whom I respect deeply over the last 10 years, how they had to change their leadership style, how they had to grow as a leader and lead people differently than they did several years earlier, just from a standpoint of what their people were expecting of them in order to say, I will follow you, you are my leader. That changes, and it used to change generationally. Now it seems to be changing every 3 to 6 years. And if you don't have the ability to do this, you can't kind of skate along in whatever it was that you're already doing. You won't be able to skate along for an entire career and then just be like, well, now that I'm at the end of my career, I'm not changing, I'll just retire, and it's up to the next people to kind of do this the right way. This is something you have to continually evolve within yourself, or you will be ousted. You will be the people who report to you will not look at you as a leader, and over a long enough period of time, the company you work for will not look at you as a leader because of it, and you'll be replaced, because this is the cost of admission. You need to put this time into yourself.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to this episode's 1-minute hack. But first, a few words from our sponsors.
All right, for this episode's 1-minute hack, here's what I want you to do. I want you to schedule out 1 hour of personal self-development time on a weekly basis that you hold yourself to at all costs. It needs to be an appointment you make with yourself that is no different than showing up to work on time. Put it for a time that you know that you'll be able to hold to, and actually hold yourself to it, understanding that whatever you do during that hour after it's over with, you may not feel like it was productive. You may not feel like it was worth it. It was worth it, even if in the moment you're not getting something from it that you can immediately put into action or use the next time you're at work. This is something that gets filed away, but the goal is to have this become part of your rhythm. The more you do it, the more you hold yourself to it, the more you will start to crave it, because you will start to see the fruits of that labor over time. But it starts with actually scheduling it and holding yourself to it like it was just as an important part of your schedule as eating or sleeping or time with your family. This is important if you want to grow as a leader, and whatever it is that you're doing during that hour is fine, as long as it's in spirit of how are you growing yourself as a leader, how are you becoming more resilient as a leader, how are you becoming more agile as a leader, the things that you can do to make sure that you can respond in the moment when your people need you. That's the goal of this. Don't stop doing it. Do it consistently. It might take a while before you think that was worth it. It will be worth it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think that, I found audiobooks have worked best for me, especially because I can tag certain things that I hear and type in a quick note as just a reminder of what it was, and go back to that later. Because again, whether you read books and use a highlighter and a note system, or it's a digital book, like whatever it is that works for you, do that thing. My suggestion is, as you go along taking in the content, just mark those pieces where you say, man, that made a lot of sense to me, that spoke to me, maybe that's something I want to dig a little bit deeper into, or maybe I don't even understand that concept, but let me find out what this is. Take a moment as you're consuming the content to earmark the things that stick out to you for whatever the reasons are. Then go back and in a separate reading or a separate time, a separate listen, go back to just those moments and listen to it again, read it again, check it out again, and then just ask your question. Okay, how would I bring that to life at work? What would need to happen for that to be something that would happen, at my job as a leader? Just ask yourself that question, write that down, think about it. But that to me is like the ultimate, like, big step for the unlock, is taking that time, that dedicated time that you've committed to, and reflecting on that time a little bit, and then saying, like, what would those actions look like? Because then I think you'll find out that some of those actions are super long term. They require a lot of heavy lifting and partnerships. Some of the actions are like, man, I could do this tomorrow with my team and see what happens. And so, like, just starting to build out that strategy and starting to build in the actions of what you want to take away, I think is a really, really big step in the right direction.
I agree with that. I also think it's important to put some distance between the two. Don't just go back and listen to it the very next day. Let it stew a while, and then go back and listen to them or read them again after a week or two to make sure that they still resonate in the same way. Like I have found when I've done this in the past, sometimes I start to hear these things again, and I'm thinking, yes, that's exactly what I was thinking. I love this. I still love it just as much today as when I first heard it. Other times I'll be like, was that an accidental, Mark? Did I put that in did I really mean to do that? And that means that whatever it was that was resonating with me, it had to do with whatever mindset I was in that moment when I was listening to it, and not something that was really applicable to me as a leader or the, kind of the broader picture. And so put some distance between, go back and re-listen or re-watch or whatever it is that you did. Make sure that they are relevant before you attempt to put them in action, because not everything is going to work. You might consume 100 pieces of content over different mediums to find 2 or 3 that resonate with you in the right way. It doesn't mean that the other 97 or 98 are failures. It means that you're putting this thought leadership into yourself in terms of what resonates. Because at the end of the day, if it doesn't resonate with yourself, if it's not something that you can buy into, there's no way you can implement it. There's no way you can put it into action. It starts with you being able to kind of accept it and having it be something that excites you.
Yeah, and as we wrap up the series, I kind of want to just pull this all the way back to full circle to the title of this quadrant thing that we talked about, the 4 zones of thought leadership. To inspire, a leader must think first and then align their actions with those thoughts. There are 4 key zones to consider. So again, this whole thing is really about that idea of you have to think first and then align your actions with those thoughts. And I think that we really want to land the point here about that time to reflect, to consider, to think about what it is that you want to do in these 4 different quadrants here, and how you're going to have an impact on your team. There's so much of leadership that is learned through experience and time, and there's so many things that you just know innately are like, this will work if I approach it this way, or I'll get this type of an outcome if I approach it that way. But as we're all learning, and as the bar of leadership is continuing to rise and evolve, the amount of time you spend in your own head thinking about these things and then putting it to action not only is important for the people that you lead, but it's important for yourself to build in the skills and the strategy, because you're going to go up against those hurdles from time to time in your career. And if you've built the skill to understand, okay, let me think about that, then let me think about how I want to respond to that or put action to that. Then let me go do that action. That type of skill building and confidence building is going to be majorly critical as you kind of climb the ladder of leadership, and then have less time in the tactic day to day and more time in the kind of inspiration, direction, and leadership of leaders at much higher levels.
Right. Thinking first and then aligning the actions is the measure twice and cut once. Right. The mistakes that you make as a leader, a lot of them can be attributed to the cutting first and measuring later. And the more prepared you are, the more tools you have in your tool belt, and the more you have put this thought in advance, not in the moment, because in the moment it's really hard to think first. In the moment, you're going to be called upon to make a decision or to act, and you're not going to have time to go like, okay, press pause here. Let me go listen to some TED Talks, and then I'll come back to you and we'll have this conversation later on. You have to put this work in advance, so that when you are called upon to act, you don't need to put the time and effort in then. You've already done it, because again, flying by the seat of your pants, hoping it's going to work out by making a decision and just hoping it was the right decision is a good way to, make a career stalling or career ending decision as a leader.
Absolutely. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you all next time.